I had one of those Facebook memories come up this week. It reminded me I was in Vietnam exactly a year ago, putting the finishing touches to a tour I was due to co-host this year. Who would have predicted that a worldwide pandemic would not just put the kibosh on that tour, but the words like social distancing and flattening the curve would become part of our everyday vernacular? And who'd have thought that we wouldn't be travelling internationally anymore at all, and if we did travel, we'd have to quarantine. Welcome to COVID 2020. Quarantine's become that hot potato issue. We've all seen Premier Andrews copping the flak for the breaches in hotel quarantine in Victoria. But why has it even become a state issue? Quarantine's been the Commonwealth's responsibility since 1908. I know we've not been travelling this much this year, but we can't surely forget those quarantine cards that we used to have to fill in on those biosecurity questions as we came into land, into airports before COVID. The Border Force collected those cards. It's always been a Commonwealth issue. But to be fair, the COVID pandemic is a world first for all governments across the global community. But let's quickly recap Australia's quarantine process since the beginning of COVID. Do you remember when COVID was, using Trump's phrasing, just that China virus? And Australians in Wuhan were evacuated on Qantas flights to be housed on Christmas Island and also a mining camp facility outside of Darwin. Once it was clear that the virus wasn't just going to be the China virus spreading across the globe, Christmas Island ceased to be good enough for Australian travellers, or should I say non-Chinese Australian travellers. And then in mid-March, self-isolation became the thing, where you had to go home and stay there for 2 weeks. But unfortunately, humans couldn't be trusted to do the right thing, and by the end of March, hotel quarantine became the new rule. Quarantine works. The bloody virus is coming in on planes and cases are being picked up in hotels. But what's been mostly bullshit about hotel quarantines, it's been made a mockery of by the rich, famous and powerful. All state premiers said there's to be no exemptions to quarantine for international arrivals. Yet, Kerry Stokes was able to get into WA when he flew in from Aspen on his private jet in April. Apparently he'd had a medical procedure which gave him a medical exemption, although he'd just been skiing, so I'm guessing the medical condition couldn't have been that bad, although we're never allowed to know because for privacy issues no one will know what Kerry Stokes' issue was, but either way he did avoid hotel quarantine. In Queensland, Jeanette Young, the Chief Health Officer there, said there's no special treatment for anyone. And then Danny Minogue flew in with her son from COVID-infested America in July and isolated in a private residence in Queensland. Tom Hanks, the first celebrity, do you remember way back in March, to be diagnosed with COVID, and the world took a sharp intake of breath? Well, he's just returned to the Gold Coast to continue filming the movie that stopped abruptly when he got sick. Nothing against Tom Hanks personally, he seems like a beautiful human being, but our international borders have been closed for months. But Tom's got back in because apparently we're desperate for an Elvis biopic that's being filmed in Queensland. So Scott Morrison will take any opportunity to criticise Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk for double standards over her border closures. But Scotty, they're all doing it. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian said there's to be no exemptions for hotel quarantine and promptly let Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban fly back from America to reside in their South Coast private estate without going into hotel quarantine back in July. At least they're Australians. Which brings me conveniently to Alan Sugar, the old barrow boy made good from Hackney in London's East End. Billionaire and host of the UK Apprentice, he just flew into Sydney this week, jumping the queue ahead of thousands of Australians desperate to get home. He even tweeted, "I've not travelled on a commercial airline for 25 years. Yesterday I travelled to Sydney with Emirates. I've never experienced service like it in my life. It was fantastic." Well, of course it is, Alan. You travel first class because you can afford it, but thousands of Australians can't. Adding to insult to injury, Alan and his wife were able to skip government-run hotel quarantine, isolate privately. Presidential suite in a hotel not good enough for you, Alan. Alan couldn't understand Australians' anger at this. He even tweeted to one critic, "Yet same rule for me and a tosser like you." Well, that's going to endear you to the Australian public, isn't it, Alan? So Alan's touched down to film a series of Celebrity Apprentice in Australia, just so you know. Again, I'm sure that's essential to be filmed in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. Alan, you're fired. Defence Minister Linda Reynolds and Foreign Minister Maurice Payne, they flew to America to have a meeting with US Secretary Pompeo. For some reason that couldn't be done on Zoom. And then Tony Abbott, of course, he just got a travel exemption to fly to the UK to be offered a job as the UK's trade envoy, whatever that means, and fly back again. Now, to be fair, he is in quarantine, but he has been criticising about the system, which is basically undermining how it's all being run. The double standards on quarantine regulations are mostly bullshit. Due to fewer planes flying and national captain arrivals being 4,000 a week, there's over 24,000 Australians stranded overseas, with 4,000 considered vulnerable. Cost of flights have soared and flights are getting cancelled left, right and centre. The Senate COVID committee has been hearing from citizens suffering hardships from around the world due to these travel bans. They feel they're not being looked after by the government, and basically the government's washed its hands of them. People have got mortgages to pay here. They haven't been able to get back to see sick relatives or to get to funerals. All different reasons, obviously, why people are overseas. For example, there's a family in the UK who need to get back to their house in Newcastle, and they've been quoted $120,000 to fly back from the UK per family because there's no economy class seats. There's a plan to increase the cap to 6,000 a week. Understandably, the state premiers are a bit reluctant to do this because he wants to be the next Dan Andrews when it all goes pear-shaped. Don't get me wrong, for what it's worth, I agree with quarantine. We're an island, we should be able to keep this virus out, but surely there's a better way to be doing this. Look at how other countries are handling it. Vietnam had their quarantine camps earlier in the year, and they kept the numbers low because of that. I've got a friend who just returned to Singapore, and he's wearing a tracker wrist bracelet for 7 days while he self-isolates. What the hell happened to Christmas Island? That can house 1,000 people, and it's currently costing us millions to house the Biloela family, who should be home in Biloela with the people that love them. And then there's that mining camp facility outside of Darwin that can house 3,500 people that was used for the Wuhan evacuees back in March. Take the pressure off the state premiers and give control of our borders back to border force, whose job it is to control our borders. There has to be a better way of handling quarantine so that Australians in their thousands can come home.